Welcome everyone to the 8th annual IBM I Marketplace Survey. Very excited to be with you here. This is, of course, the 8th year of the survey, and just so for people who are not familiar with it, we ask the questions sometime around September and October of every year, and then present the results in January. It does take us some time to compile the results, so it's good for us to be able to bring that forward to the market. This year we had about 450 customers fill out the survey again, which is amazing in my mind, and hats off to all of you because there are 40 questions in the survey, and of course you don't get a Subway sandwich or a gift card to Amazon or wherever else that you may shop online these days. So we do appreciate your willingness to be able to take the survey and again answer all those 40 questions. So again, my team here at Help Systems, hats off to our marketing team who helped compile the results. There is a PDF on our website. We are recording this webinar, so the results and the commentary around the results will be available for playback at a later point in time. So let's move it over to our guest. Let's start out with Mr. Ian Jarman. Ian, what's your background with IBM and what do you do today?
Thanks, Tom. Welcome everybody. I'm the CTO for IBM Lab Services, and of course we're the professional services team inside IBM. And by the way, just new news for us, we've recently integrated with our technical support services, so we're in one big team inside IBM after the exit of our Kyndryl colleagues. So that's a great new adventure for us. And my background has been on power systems for the past 36 years. And at one time I was the IBM I product manager, but I've always been working in one capacity or another with the System 36, AS400, and now of course on IBM I. So I'm really happy to be joining the team again here.
Thank you, Ian. It's great to have you back. Mr. Dan Sun, what's your background now these days with IBM, and what are you doing for the operating system, I guess?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, so it was kind of exciting last year, beginning of 2021. I got the opportunity to transition to being an IBM I product manager. Allison Butterall, who you should be probably very familiar with, she's still around. We're kind of co-IBM I product managers. I mean, this kind of shows the testament to the brand, the investment that we just needed more people to support the platform. So I got the opportunity to take that last year. For the previous 20 years, I was in a tech sales role supporting Power and IBM I, and then before that, I started my career in the IBM I Support Center. So I'm going on just a little over 30 years, pretty much always supporting IBM I and kind of based here in Rochester. So it's kind of the motherland here for the product. So glad to kind of have different sides of the coin, related to this particular platform.
So if you have any technical questions, you can shoot them Dan's way then, by the sounds of it, with that support.
I don't know, I can find the answer probably.
Okay,
So
well, welcome, Dan.
Hear that.
Yeah. Timothy, you've been waiting patiently there. What's your background? What do you do for the industry?
Well, I'm the co-editor along with Alex Woody of the 400, which keeps its old name because it's trademarked. Don't get mad at me. I know the name of the product has changed over the years, but the publication can't easily do that. And we've been following the AS400 and its progeny since July of 1989. So I started a little bit later than the rest of everyone else, but we've been there all that time and watched all the remarkable change in the platform. And we're there to help people understand about that platform and how it's changing.
Timothy, and I know another little part to your background is that you guys don't just look at IBM I. You also, a lot of people may not realize that you're looking at other technologies and chip processors outside of IBM I.
Yeah, both Alex and I have second jobs that we
yeah.
do different things, and we try to inform the rest of the IT market into what we write about IBM I, and then I take a lot of time reminding people when I see a hyperscaler do something interesting. It's like, we did that 40 years ago. Give me a break.
Yeah, it's been happening on the platform for a while. So,
welcome,
Timothy.
Platform the way we do.
Yes.
We got it.
and it's an interesting comment on that, right? So, well, today we're going to just do some demographics about the survey quickly. I'll run through that. The data center, we'll talk about IT initiatives, and then again, the outlook for IBM I as recorded by the respondents from the many different industries and around the globe that took the survey, and then a quick infomercial on help systems at the end. There will be a couple polling questions along the way too, but let's talk demographics first. And you know, the survey when we first started was pretty much 80% US and then the rest of the world. That's changed over the years. We're now at 52% North America. We got a good smattering of customers in Latin America nowadays, the Caribbean, Asia Pacific, Australia, Europe that are filling out the survey. So we thank you globally on behalf of Help Systems, the market, IBM, to answer the survey. And then again, another thing that helps legitimize the survey is, as we know, IBM I is in the largest companies of the world and in the smallest companies of the world. And the survey kind of reflects that too, if you look at the numbers. And then I also am always very excited to see that we had 16% of the people who took the survey were CIO, C-level type people, or director, VP level within their organizations. Of course, 20% managers. And then, of course, we get the developers, the administrators, and other professionals that have filled out the survey. That's really a good mix of people across the world again. And then to remind you about the industry. Industry is so important with this platform, and a lot of people who are outside of the industry or even within the industry of their own might say, am I the only manufacturer running IBM I? Am I the only bank? Am I the only distribution center? And the answer is no. There are other people across the globe in various industries like yours that are using IBM I yet today. Timothy, I know you had some comments about things and where you see the various industries growing.
Well, I think historically, if you looked, back 20, 30 years, you would find that process manufacturing, discrete manufacturing, retail and wholesale distribution, those were the core businesses. And over time, banking and finance has risen. Insurance is kind of where it used to be. I think the IT software development, that it's that high is just a function of who's taking the survey. I think that gives a false impression that this is the more important than distribution. I don't think that's true, but generally this has stayed roughly the same. I think we've lost a little distribution and retail. We've gained a little manufacturing, and I think it's a function of the strength of the application portfolio that existed in the past and has been brought into the future. I think this is the health and wealth of the platform right there in that chart.
Yeah, thank you. And then, of course, to me, one of the true values of this platform is related to the staffing. And when you look at total cost of operations or ownership of technology, IBM I typically does not need a lot of administrators, and you can really get a lot done with a few developers on this platform because of the integrated nature of the database and the languages that are built over top of it. So it is a highly productive environment from an administration standpoint and from a development standpoint. And I think it's one of the reasons that the platform's been so sticky and related to what's going on with COVID and people working from home. They've been able to access IBM I without a problem. And you'll see that later in today's graph. I also want to remind people that IBM and the community around it haven't been stagnant. We just saw two major things last year. We saw TR4 and TR5 for 7.1. We also saw the announcement of the scale up servers in September of Power 10. Draw attention to the new Ibm I Navigator. It's really another example of technology that IBM's working on to better your experience as a customer, as a business partner. And then along the way, all these virtual events that have cropped up. I'm kind of excited to say that I feel like we're going to have some in-person events finally here coming back, the mainstream ones. I know that several user groups and other events have certainly met throughout the year to do in-person things. But even draw attention to the tech channel Rising Stars, which has replaced the Fresh Faces as something that's important as people bring in new talent to the platform. I know at Help Systems ourselves, we got involved with some interns, and we've hired interns to bring new, fresh people into our staff. It's a fantastic way of growing your talent and your skills on the platform. So let's move on to our first polling question. Speaking of this, we kind of want to know what your experience has been and when you got started on the platform. I know myself, I came into this technology not knowing a thing. People always talk about, well, how are we going to train new people? I think about my own career coming out of college. I knew nothing about a System 38 or 36, but yet that's where my first job was. I was a COBOL trained, basic trained, Pascal trained programmer from a college in Wisconsin. And my first job was looking at RPG2 lifecycle. I learned it, and after a month's time, I was very proficient in it. And hence my career started way back on the System 38 platform. But my point here is that new people can learn what the platform is. It's a matter of putting the right technology in front of them and doing things like the open source that's supported and other things will really help people grow. All right, let's see. Let's take enough time there on that survey. And let me share the results here. I'm not sure we'll have any surprises. It looks like 48% with us today started on that in that era of the 80s with System 38 or 36, 27% AS400, 5% iSeries, 7% same before, even before that, and 13% are IBM I background, which is great to see. So almost 15% of the customers with us today or partners have IBM I experience. All right, let's move on into the data center, and over to you, Tim, to talk about how many IBM Power servers people have today. Why does this matter, right?
Well, I mean, I'm surprised. I'm still seeing the poll on the I don't have a survey.
Oh, here we go.
Well, that
There
means
you go. Thank you.
That's
so,
it.
I'm a little surprised that there's more than 3. We've had virtualization long before everybody else since the late 90s. Yes, I did say that right.
Yep.
So I get that you need 2 machines for HA and a third for replication, and your third can be the cloud. But it's interesting to me that people still have distinct machines. I believe them. There are reasons for it, for keeping geographies absolutely separate, and you might have sovereignty issues or whatever. But I'm just amazed that it's more than that number. But most of it isn't. So I guess that 2 to 5, I always want to see a finer granularity than we have, but you can't have an infinitely long chart either.
It's hard to compare things year over year. So if we keep changing the questions,
That's right.
so I always beat that down. No, don't change it because then we can't compare it, right? So.
But I want to talk to the one who's got 31 or more. It's like,
and there are. I will tell you, I talk to customers with 31 or more, and I know Dan and Ian do too. So they're definitely out there. So if we look at partitions, and I guess Timothy brought this up as, this is not new. What are your thoughts on the usage of partitions today, Ian?
Yeah, well, of course, Power VM is, in practical use all around the world, and it's been a great advantage for consolidation and optimization over time. And I can see, Tim, that if you look at that, over 31, for example, it's going to be on this chart, the people who have hundreds of partitions. So it's very reassuring that we have large enterprises using IBM I, and it's very reassuring that we have mid-sized companies using IBM I. So wherever you are, it's good to know that you're in a bigger pool with people who are very committed to the platform. So these figures haven't changed that much. The one thing I'd say on the previous chart is it's going to be really interesting over time. We're going to talk about it in a moment, but we talk about how many servers people have in their data center, but the modern question might be, how many servers they have elsewhere in the cloud, for example. How many partitions are they running in the cloud? So this is a very dynamic area, and what we're seeing today is an increasing recognition that in the future, some of these partitions are going to be in cloud data centers, not on site.
Yeah, I think regulations too have pushed people into taking that old practice of having both development and production all on the same server and splitting them into separate VMs or partitions, you want to call them. So we've seen that, one partition type number keep going down and down. I think originally it was somewhere around 35% 8 years ago, but slowly it's getting to the point where people have more than one partition. And occasionally, just for customers out there for fact, I've had people say, well, it costs me more from IBM to put another partition on my system, and that's not true. That's not true. All right, let's talk, Dan, about staying current. I'm sure as product offering manager on Ibm I, you want everybody to be current, I would guess.
Yep, and the trend of this chart is good. That when we look at our latest releases, so 7.4 came out in 2019. We know it takes a lot of our customers 18 plus months to kind of gradually adopt that. So it's good to see that the 7.4 number is going up. 7.3 numbers staying pretty stable, but more importantly 7.1 and 7.2 are going down. 7.1 and 7.2 both went end of service in 2021. For 7.1 it was the service extension got extended just a little bit more, but it really is not a product that we're enhancing in the future. And 7.2 just last May went to its first service extension. These service extensions are just really meant to help get customers a little more time to get to our current releases. So yeah, we see these that going forward, we want people on our latest releases. And when you talked about Power 10, the scale up system they announced in September only supports 7.3 and 7.4. So really that's the releases that our customers need to be at if they're going to adopt further technology.
Timothy, what are your thoughts on this slide?
This looks absolutely normal. If you looked at Linux or Windows, which are the only other two platforms that matter in the data center at this point, that's ZOS, of course, but you would see similar curves if you look at different generations of each one of those platforms. This is a normal curve. We're not behind, we're not ahead. And people take their time for good reasons. They have applications that may be tuned or only certified to run on one operating system, and that recertification process is onerous, and they put it off as long as they can. And people often skip releases. So I would expect a lot of 7.1 people to go to 7.3, not 7.4. I would expect a lot of 7.2 to go to 7.4, not this year, but maybe next year. So it's there's so much grief involved in that process. I will say this though, that the technology release capabilities that IBM is doing for the last couple of years at least make it easier to do the transitions within an operating system. Like things get made current and they get refreshed in a way that it's consumable, and that has been remarkably good for the base. And I think that's why these curves can be so high.
And Dan, let's have you talk a little bit about what the roadmap is right now for Ibm I.
Yeah. So this slide, the next slide, hopefully kind of give a good picture of our roadmap. So kind of at the top, you can see our major releases. So we're committed to delivering major new releases as needed. We've had gaps. We had a 4-year gap, and some people said that's too long. We had a 2-year gap. People said, whoa, that's too fast. So we had a 3-year gap between 7.3 and 7.4, and people liked that. We got lots of positive feedback. And so we currently have, at least 2 future releases in development. And, I'm just kind of hedging the bets. We've that 3-year kind of just seemed like a nice roadmap. So we are still going to, continue to come out with new releases. And the arrow to the right, there's no end. So, get that out of people's heads that, the platform is vibrant, the platform is growing, and, there is no end. And as Timothy mentioned, we are using technology refreshes to give new feature functions at a kind of twice a year, level, to the releases that we're supporting. We like to have 2 major releases getting TRs. So right now it's, 7.3 and 7.4. And so when we come up with things like new adapters, new functions, and in this case, just recently when we had the Power 10 scale up E1080 system, it was the latest 7.4 TR and the latest 7.3 TR that I kind of highlighted in red that picked that up. And then as we announce future hardware, which some people are thinking about, that will be also picked up in some PTFs that will be available in a TR to give you that feature function. So major new releases, predictable kind of clip level of things that we can't do in a TR or that are just, so large that have to be tested on a whole system boundary, operating system boundary. And then this chart is a kind of a flip of that to kind of give you more of the support. So Timothy mentioned, some of this too of, the releases that we have. We have typically like a 7-year life for premier support for an operating system. Then we have historically given a 3-year service extension. Again, the service extension comes with an extra cost, and it's really to give people time to get to our new releases. So 7.1 was supposed to end last year, but since we enabled it on Power 9, we thought we couldn't just take it away right away. So we gave another extension. You can see there, if you're on Power 9 for 7.1, you get a little bit more. But again, we're very clear that we are not enhancing 7.1 at all. This was more of just a support extension. And then 7.2 transitioned to the first service extension, or the normal service extension, where again, for an extra cost, you can run on the platform and still get support. But we are enhancing 7.3 and 7.4. And then on the left, you could see with our N-2 upgrades, just like Timothy said, we think our customers, some are very predictable of, they wait a certain amount of time, they don't want to be the first, and then they do an upgrade, whereas others wait a little bit longer, and then they do the skip upgrades so that they're doing less, frequent upgrades. And then again, arrows going to the right, we have more releases in roadmap.
So what about staying current in the data center with the hardware, Dan? What are you guys seeing at IBM with that?
Yeah, I mean, we are, an operating system that runs on the hardware, and there's benefits to going to the, latest and greatest generations. So there's a whole chart that shows all the releases and what they run on the hardware. So Power 9 has been out since 2018. So that's a great hardware platform. Now runs 7.1 through 7.4. So we'd hope that our customers would see the value of more reliable system, more performance per core, adopting of new I/O adapters and storage adapters. So this chart kind of shows that people are moving to new technology. Power 7 Plus went out of service the end of 2020. So hopefully, again, customers are looking at that. We have probably people that are running on old Ibm I. Hopefully, they're also sometimes also stuck on older hardware. So we're trying to get people to refresh and stay current. And then if you look this week, we just did an announcement that Power 8, which has already been withdrawn, we're now going to withdraw parts for MES upgrades. So that was just announced on Tuesday. That again, trying to get rid of some of the older hardware. And then last fall, we had also done a statement, a planning statement that says 7.4 was the last release to run on Power 8. So kind of giving you headlights that if you want to, when IBM comes out with a new Ibm I release and you see all the new things in it and you want to go to it, you're going to have to be on Power 9 or later hardware to take advantage of that new release. So staying current, from the maintenance benefits, those type of technology benefits, really behooves people, trying to stay current on Ibm I and stay current on their hardware.
So Ian, I know you guys are in lab services. What are some of the things that you guys are seeing from a lab services perspective and hardware changes?
Well, first of all, of course, we're seeing both Power 9 and now with the latest Power 10 implementation, we're very active, first of all. And actually, when I look back at our results for last year, we're very active, particularly in Ibm I, which turns out to be one of our strongest growth areas within lab services today. So there's a wide range of projects going on, but we're always seeing, refreshing of technology, of course, but we're also seeing a lot of activity in specific areas, including performance optimization, including cybersecurity, including high availability. So there's a lot of action going on across our lab services team worldwide, specifically on Ibm I. So it's very encouraging for everybody out there. Thank you.
Yeah. So Tim, I know you were very interested in seeing the plan for upgrade in 2022. What are your thoughts on this slide?
I went back and compared it to the chart that was done just before Power, or just as Power 9 was coming into the market and people were thinking about it. And the funny bit is that it's not that different. So 10% of those surveyed said here that they're going to do a hardware, they're considering or doing a plan for, a plan. Let's be careful about that word considering, because we're going to talk about that in a second in the next chart. It was 11% before Power 9. it was 16% for software only during the Power 9 cycle when it began, and it's 23 this year. It was 31% for doing both, and it's 28, and it's 42% in the past, and now it's 39 for people who are saying they're not doing anything. So that strikes me as about a normal balance, right? I mean, this is our base. The hardware moves slower than the software, and the hardware itself is being upgraded at a slower pace than the hardware, the software. So that makes sense, right? And even in the other markets where x86 markets or the ARM server market that's emerging, and there used to be a Unix RISC market, but IBM owns that now, so we don't need to talk about that anymore. You know, the cadence for hardware looks like it's every year, but it really isn't. If you look at it architecturally, they're doing some minor tweaks to get their generation every other year, or every year. So flip to the next chart though, because this is where it gets interesting, if you would. So that's an amazing number. So yes, there are only 10% are planning to do it, but 73% are thinking about it. And we've never asked this question before, but I doubt it's ever been that high. And I think if we had asked the question in the past, it wouldn't be that high. This is an amazing number. And I think people are ready to get off of some older iron. And I'm hoping that IBM will be very aggressive about how it helps people get from some of this older machinery, Power 7, Power 7 Plus, Power 8. All of those machines should be upgraded in some fashion, and you know, it's up to IBM to figure out the best way to do that. That's Dan's problem, Allison's problem.
What do you think, Dan? Since it's your problem.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just like Timothy. This is a great number to see that there's so many people, you know, looking at, you know, the new hardware, which hopefully then they're also looking at operating system. You know, we don't typically recommend people do OS and hardware upgrades at the same time. So this is a great story of, hey, you're looking for the hardware. We've kind of told you what operating system releases will be on the new hardware. If you're not there, you know, start thinking about what it's going to take to get your operating system, your ISV applications, your homegrown, you know, to a newer level. So then you can be ready and prepared for, you know, when IBM rolls out the rest of the product family, you know, with Power 10. So you're at 7.3 and 7.4, you're well positioned to, you know, move to our latest hardware.
Yeah, and I think I'll do a little shameless plug for Help Systems. One of the things that we do in the background with the business partner channel and IBM Tech Line and stuff is we help people size systems. So what's really important for you to think about is make sure you have that flight recorder running if you're thinking about Power 10. Make sure you have the IBM Collection Services running, or if you're on one of the other sibling operating systems of AIX or Linux on Power, that you have Nmon running, so that we can give you a great picture of what your performance is going to look like when you get to Power 10.
One last thought, if I may, Tom, it's real short.
Yeah.
A hardware upgrade always implies price performance improvement, and that's what people are excited about. And they might spend the same amount of money as they did for their last system, but they're going to get so much more for it. And that's why people are excited. I think everybody anticipates, and we've done our part in explaining that, so is IBM, a really big architectural jump, and one that's relevant for embedding AI functionality into applications going forward. And that's, I think, going to be a driver. People are going to be thinking about that.
Very true, very true. Ian, what do you think about other operating systems sitting alongside of IBM I and customers' data centers?
Yeah, well, the first thing to say, I think we're going to see later in a chart relating to cloud that I don't think anybody today aspires to run more on Windows. There's lots of people that are deploying Linux, and we're seeing that sort of broadly across the industry, and we're seeing that, you know, close to IBM I also. So that's good news. And in fact, you know, with Power 10, we expect to see some AI activity with kind of a sidecar of AI, you know, with IBM I applications offloading AI to a sidecar running on Linux. So there's a lot of integration that we have with Linux. But of course, the biggest thing that's happening from the IBM side is the integration of all the activities relating to Red Hat. And Red Hat as an operating system, of course, with Linux, but also more broadly, Red Hat with other technologies, including Ansible. It's not listed here, but Ansible for automation is becoming incredibly interesting to IBM I clients, using the collections that we have out there, as well as integrating with Ansible being used on x86 platforms. So yeah, the dynamic, I believe, outside of IBM I is relating to Linux, both on-premise and also in the cloud.
Very good. Thank you, Ian. So Dan, what are some of those AI use cases that you see with IBM I and Linux? What are you thinking about from a Rochester perspective?
Yeah, so in September, and with the Power 10 scale up announcement, we kind of did kind of highlighted a nice little use case out there. I don't think it probably got the acknowledgement that it should, so we're probably going to talk a little bit more about it. But the strategy of again, our open source strategy is run what we can in IBM I, that makes sense. But then there's a lot of things that don't make sense. And so yeah, we had a great use case where some open source packages were running on IBM I, working with IBM I data, and then there was some AI analytic kind of applications that were Linux based, running in a partition, as what we're lovingly call a sidecar, right next to IBM I, that then working back and forth, give you the value of that kind of package solution, but without having to have everything in IBM I or only leveraging Linux. So I think there's going to be use cases there, and as Ian mentioned, with some of the MMA capabilities that are in Power 10, I think we're going to see operating systems on Power. What can they do inside the operating system? And then, like I said, where can we partner up with another operating system, in this case Linux, for Ansible, for OpenShift, for just plain Linux type workloads, where it makes sense.
And you also don't have to buy a GPU to do inference now.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. And even some training workloads could be done if they're not huge on Power 10 itself. And that's the beauty of those MMA units and the vector units on there.
Thank you for that conversation on AI. How about the storage, Dan? I know you've been working in the field and helping customers in this area. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so again, if we went back and looked at this chart each year, you would see that the growth of external storage. Way back when, customers only wanted internal storage. It was the most performing, had large cache controllers. This was a great solution. And then our largest customers, started making the move to external storage. We have lots of great features that a lot of people are asking for from an HADR standpoint, from a consolidation, from a virtualization and management, and now specifically encryption, to be able to do data at rest encryption of storage, without any performance penalty with external storage, has really driven that number up. So we see a lot of our customers move in that direction. At the same time, we are still we're kind of moving away from HDDs and SSDs and moving more toward NVMe, which is a flash protocol, but more of an optimized stack or path to the operating system. So you saw that with our 2020 updates to the scale outs, we did more NVMe, and you're going to see that in the future, in future hardware platforms where NVMe is kind of the go forward platform. So you can still get a system with front NVMe storage devices, and kind of native operating system with IBM I, do the things that you want to do. Or if you're looking for additional capabilities, you can have external storage. So you still have good choice of what you want to do.
And Ian, we'll have you talk about IBM I in the cloud and maybe what you're seeing from a lab services perspective.
Yeah, so first of all, if you look here, we've been developing this question over time in this survey, so it's really interesting to see the results. So thank you for participating here. But you can see that still the majority of people are running on-premise, but you can see that there is a strong and growing cloud usage of IBM I, both completely moving to cloud and also even more in a hybrid environment. Of course, this is growing and expected to grow. And one of the areas that we've been working very closely with in lab services is IBM Virtual Servers, which is where you can run IBM I, AIX, and Linux in the cloud. And that really is taking off. We've got IBM data centers worldwide with that infrastructure laid down. Lab services has been involved in deploying that infrastructure, and now we're migrating clients. And Dan, I think you can mention that we've been adding more virtual tape capability, for example, to help that migration. So the tools for the migration, for the resiliency in the cloud are improving. And this is becoming, I think, a go-to option for many of our clients going forward.
Yeah, my perspective on cloud is that we have to think about the reason people move to the cloud for IBM I is different than the reason they moved from x86. If I think about x86, what you're doing in going to the cloud is getting rid of the headache of managing the server sprawl, right? That's kind of the main reason behind that. With IBM I, it's more of I want to get out of the data center practice altogether, and or I need skills that I don't have in managing the system no longer because maybe my administrator's gone or something like that. Whereas, x86, it's about the sprawl. I can't manage 1,000 servers anymore. We're just going crazy, right? And I can't have enough staff to take care of it. IBM I, it's not that way. So, Ian, I also know you guys get involved quite a bit with high availability. And I also know that our pace is probably a little slower than it should be. So we probably got to get moving along on as we answer questions.
I mean, as usual.
As usual.
Yeah. So we have a very strong high availability practice, and so we're always encouraged to see that strong high availability number there. And on the right-hand side there, you can see this combination of software solutions and hardware solutions, and there's always going to be a balance there with some people using both at the same time. But in general, this practice for us is very active and very successful, and we just encourage people to make sure that not only do they have a high availability solution in place, but they're doing regular testing of that, role swaps and so on. So this is a good trend in this chart here.
Yeah, I think it's one of those strong suits again about we think what are unique things about IBM I, it's that recoverability capabilities. The backups and the high availability are definitely realities. So Tim, from top IT concerns, any surprises here or changes over years that you see?
Well, I mean, I'm always comforted. I think I say this, frequently, but reduce IT spending keeps moving to the right. It's just not a problem, and it's increasingly not a problem. I am so surprised that cybersecurity and ransomware isn't like 99.7%, because that's a real problem. And air gapping your backups and locking down your system as much as possible, all these things, everyone's going to get that phone call or that email or whatever at some point if they're not careful. And that's a real big deal, and it's getting worse. So I'm surprised that people aren't more concerned than even that. High availability, that's part of it, right? This is, you have to have a highly available system and replication to secure yourself against possible cyber attack. And then application modernization is going to be there forever. Skills is going to be an increasing problem as well. AI is way over on the right-hand side. It's not there yet, but as we said earlier, IBM's laying the foundation so that you can just do it painlessly, and they're doing it on the mainframe too. They have a different approach with the Tilum processor on the mainframe, but the idea is that AI inference is integrated in the system. It's inside the security boundary and the memory footprint of the server and the applications. You don't have to offload it to another machine. You don't send it out to the cloud. You don't do any of that. It's right here. It's right where it belongs, inside your system. And that's the beauty of it. And I think that will become more of a concern over time as people understand that you're going to have to add various kinds of machine learning to applications. Everyone's going to do it.
Dan, any kind of quick thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think when we see this this chart, there isn't a surprise to us, and we kind of enjoy, I guess, looking at the capabilities that we deliver in our base operating system releases and our TRs, and then draw circles over this and say, hey, yeah, you're right. We came out with DB2 mirror a couple of years ago to really try and give another option for more continuous availability. We're doing things in modernization of applications and integration of open source. We're doing stuff in security. So we would like to see that this is concerns with our customer base, and we are hopefully between us and partners like yourself delivering solutions to help our customers in these areas.
I'll just add one thing, if I may, on that, Tom, that in the area, the top concern there of cybersecurity, there's a really hot area that we've been working, which is safeguarded copies, where you can create a separate immutable copy that cannot be changed as a protection against cyber criminals and ransomware. So this is spawning new solutions in that cybersecurity areas. If you haven't looked at those types of options in the past, these are coming very fast to the IBM I marketplace today.
Ian,
A golden copy of your data, right? Go ahead, Tim.
Is that through lab services, or is it something out of IBM proper?
Well, we're part of IBM proper, but no, it's using the safeguarded copy features of disk storage. So it's generally used on external disk storage, yeah. But it's using the copy services function of our storage servers, yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
But we're implementing it for clients from lab services, yeah.
Yeah, so then we look at cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a little bit down this year, and maybe because we added ransomware to the question, we used to just say cybersecurity. But if you also look at the top concerns, there's also a piece on compliance and regulations. Nonetheless, on IBM I, there's a lot of things you can be doing if you're looking at security and really putting the proper attention to it. To me, always one of the top things these days is a good kind of firewall system with exit point type security to augment some of the other bad practices that we see from an object level perspective and what people have done. And IBM I is, to me, the most secureable system on the planet. It's just that as administrators or developers, we maybe made some mistakes along the way when we configured our application or our objects on the system and what kind of security they have. So we'll see that, right now it looks like 20% are looking to implement here in 2022 some form of antivirus and ransomware protection. These are real threats to the platform, unfortunately. Even IBM I is not totally immune to that. We also see an upgrade in multi-factor authentication, and I think that what's driving that is cybersecurity insurance. Some of the other things have been for years, compliance, privileged user access, secured file transfer, are all things that you should be considering. The challenges that the organizations have, Ian, are immense when it comes to this. What are your thoughts on cybersecurity challenges?
Yeah, and this is, over here on the left, the threats are constantly changing, and we've seen that through this year, of course. So I think, with the last two charts here, you've got to be having somebody that's focused on security, somebody that's trying to keep up with all of these elements here. So there's lots of resources out there. We talked about Common, we talked about TechU, we talked about other ways to make sure that you're keeping up with the ever-changing security threats. My view on the previous chart was, if you have exit point security in place, you're likely to be sleeping well at night. But if you don't, then you likely have not only a lack of exit point security, but you probably don't have everything else covered. So that's really in that middle point for me, which is if you don't have the basics covered like exit point security, you're likely to have vulnerabilities that you don't know about. So I would advise people to take this very seriously because the threats are serious and they're out there not only on IBM I, but on every other platform as well.
And again, it just takes one mistake in the firewall outside of IBM I where somebody opens up a port or something and now somebody's in your network. Not to scare you, but it's reality. And then we've seen, cybersecurity regulations. I always say you can get the award, pass the audit, but not be secure. But we can't, deny that these are driving a lot of the needs for security too and better practices. Ian, what do you guys? What's your biggest thing you're hearing about from lab services?
Yeah, well, I think this has stabilized a little bit after GDPR was introduced in Europe, of course, and now other similar, regulations are coming. So this privacy regulation, I would say this is more about privacy rather than cybersecurity, perhaps. But I think people generally know what they should be doing now. Now it's just adhering to those practices. And it's more of a day-to-day issue for people. I mean, even when I'm looking at data that we use internally, we all have to be very careful about using about adhering to privacy regulations and standards. So I think this has transitioned from a few years ago when GDPR was being introduced. I think generally there's an understanding of what that is now. Now it's a question of adhering and making sure that people are using those best practices.
So I think applications, is fair to say, is what makes IBM I kind of unique. It's the applications that are running. Tim, what are your thoughts on applications on IBM I?
Well, I love this chart because it is literally the DNA. It's one of those DNA charts that doesn't change. And I find that comforting. If it changed, I'd get nervous. And a couple of years ago, we added the question where we asked people about homegrown applications, because we used to not ask that question, which I think skewed it and made everybody have the impression that everybody else is, buying third-party applications. And I know from running IT Jungle and from all the people I talk to, that's absolutely not true. So it's great that this chart actually reflects reality. And then the fact that it's not changing all that much means that people are still writing their own code. And I love that. I love that we have a base where people still tune their own applications for their specific business, and they don't all just, buy the SAP monolith and change their business to meet the software. The software is supposed to meet the business. So I love them for that. So keep going.
It's a competitive advantage, right? Sure
Absolutely.
Sure is.
Google writes its own software. It doesn't buy packaged software.
Okay. What does IBM think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, just like Timothy said, this is, reassuring to see that, this matches the view that I see of, the application system that we started with is built on applications. We have thousands of ISV applications that, a lot of them that we're really working hard with to make sure that they're staying current. And at the same time, when, a lot of our customers are, creating applications, doing integrations, with different languages, and that kind of leads to this slide of, we are still continuing to enhance, and RPG is definitely not anywhere near a dead language. It's very, very robust. A lot of our customers like it. We've been like to use the word modernizing application, picking up Java, picking up C, picking up open source type things to what's a core language that needs to run on a platform, what's a language that needs to run next to something, because I want to put something up and I want to have it run on this stable platform that I have. So we have, we're not trying to track every single language and every single tool that's out there in the industry. We really, try to have a strategy that, let's really invest in the areas that make sense for our customers from a development and integration standpoint.
Yeah, I think the key here too is that people outside of IBM I doing development, when they hear RPG, they think RPG 2, right? Lifecycle stuff, and it's far from that today, as you talk about all the APIs and stuff. Tim, I know you had some comments on languages too.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of the bases. I mean, this is a very good distribution of programming language support. In the past it was RPG, SQL, CL, and COBOL pretty much. And I have to really struggle to find some language that it would need to put on there. I could argue for, the inclusion of Go for certain kinds of controller software and whatnot. You could say Rust, which is a variant of C++, but maybe R for statistical language. But I'm stretching, okay? I have to really stretch to make that case. In the past, we didn't have to stretch to make the case for PHP. We didn't have to stretch to make the case for JavaScript and Node.js. But I think IBM's done a remarkable job keeping current with whatever's going on that's interesting and usable out there by a large number of programmers. So I have zero complaints.
I think when we started the survey, Dan, we weren't talking open source, but now we are today, right?
Yeah. And, and our strategy has really changed. We were trying to make sure that we were giving our customers some open source choices, and that just based on the volume, we realized that we couldn't be giving these no charge LPP bundles that we give you. We now have a more standardized way with RPM to go to ACS and say what's on my system, and I want to get it and go update it. Try to make that a very similar look and feel to somebody who's, let's say, run on Linux and trying to get that same open source package, again, to really make sure that they're trying to reduce the barriers to adoption for where it makes sense, an open source language or open source toolkit.
Yeah. So RDI, we asked that question too because this is one of those productivity tools for developers. I will say that if you want to increase your RPG and other language development and make your developers 50% more productive, you should be looking at RDI. If you want to continue to develop at the pace that you're at, you shouldn't look at RDI. It has changed quite a bit, and there's also other solutions out there too. But the point of the matter is there's productivity tools like RDI for your developers, and they continue to enhance. So it's good to see people using it. I wish that number was more like 70% use it 100% on IBM I, but I know we have a lot of SEU and PDM type users out there. Now, automation's been a big focus of mine for years, and it's good to see that the number sitting around 0.75% or three-fourths of the customers taking the survey are running their systems as unattended as possible. Maybe having manned people during the day, but then at night, IBM I just kind of runs itself, and that's again the beauty of the integration. If you think about the work management and all the things that are built into this operating system, it is really a system that can be run fully unattended. Tim, I'm gonna let's go over to Ian to talk about remote operations. We've seen a lot of that. What's the new norm, right, that we're in these days? But your thoughts on this, Tim? Ian.
Well, first of all, let me just be very respectful to all the people around the world and listening to this webcast and everybody's families and businesses that have been affected by the pandemic.
Right.
Yeah, we really are literally all in this together. And this is an area where we've been able together to respond very quickly to the changing needs of our businesses collectively in this environment. So everybody's been pivoting to remote access, remote support, and in many cases, not just for their internal users, but in many cases, some rather dramatic changes in the way that their clients and their customers have been using their businesses, interacting in completely different ways. So the good news is that has taken place. We, on the lab services side, really shifted from doing services largely on site to remote services, and obviously that's going to rebalance somewhat, but there probably isn't going to be a new normal. There's going to be a new world where it's going to be forever affected by what happened in the pandemic. So we're not going back to the way that we were before. And there's going to be a new dynamic approach, I think, to the way that we support clients today and the way clients use remote operations. So yeah, it's a very dynamic and changing world there.
Yeah, and I'll just comment quickly on this one here because we've got some other more important charts to get to. But automated manual processes, is a big thing that we've seen during this last 2 years that customers have paid attention to. Things like printing invoices and all those kinds of things that come with it, or even still running operations, computer operations with manned people, were challenges during this period of time. So people have been automating. But let's get the important stuff. Let's talk about the Ibm I Critical Platform. And as we've seen in the survey year after year, Ibm I simply runs your business, and it continues to do that. I hear it all the time when I talk to customers on how we can count on it being up every single day. We don't think about, oh, when are we going to have to reboot it so that we can get better performance or access to the system. It just is running. Ian, any thoughts on the critical platform across the board?
Yeah, well, this has been quite stable over time, and we're very grateful as a team that people are working with us and committed to using IBM I for their most critical and important applications in their business. So yeah, this is a testament, I think, to the fact that the IBM I platform is at the core of many of your IT operations. So thank you for that.
So Tim, what are the plans for the IBM I platform? Question we ask, and obviously you're very interested in this one.
Yeah, I am.
So is IBM.
The question always gets answered by the base as if a very large portion of it is going to migrate, and it just doesn't happen. The attrition rate is what, 1 to 2% a year, maybe, and it's been declining. And there was a time when the attrition rate was much higher. But the people that are here are going to be here for a while. The ones that could move for whatever reason or needed to move have, and these are diehard customers. I will make one observation though. I will say that I think that the idea that someone is going to take a bunch of RPG or Java programs or RPG programs or COBOL programs and port them to Java or PHP and move them to a different platform, that ain't going to happen. So forget that. What is going to happen if people move, they're going to go right straight to SaaS. They're going to say, nope, I'm going to use Salesforce. Nope, I'm going to use NetSuite. Nope, or whatever it is, or an online SaaS version of any number of ERP applications. If they do decide that they do not have the skills to modernize their software or keep it up to date, they're going to do that, just like they would have picked a third-party application a zillion years ago. I think that's the one thing that I'm keeping an eye on, are people leaving, having their own software entirely and their own systems. By the way, I don't want them to do that. It's a less interesting world to me if they do that. But if they do make a move, I think that's what's.
So Dan, we'll give you the last final chart to talk about.
Yeah, and this is a great chart because I think it gets to the testament of the operating system running on a very stable power hardware platform, that our customers do see the value of IBM software running on IBM hardware with IBM services and support. If I look at our NPS, the survey that all of us get whenever we interact with a business, so would you recommend us to a friend? We're always we historically now are in the low 80s, which is really high. If you know anything about NPS, we're one of the highest in systems and with IBM. We get thousands of surveys, so it's not just 100 surveys, it's thousands of surveys. And even it was funny when last year when I became a product manager, I was looking at some of the actual responses, and even somebody who maybe had an issue with timeliness of something or not getting what they wanted, they still say, oh, but the IBM platform is really great, I really love it, I would never change. So it's our customers have trouble, even though they can pick a lower number, they have trouble totally saying it. So I think it just goes to the hallmark of the platform of people like it. It has a stickiness factor because it runs, can run automated, it can run with low staff. And then our Forrester TEI paper that we came out with last year, again, is kind of another proof point of customers see monetary value to running on a platform that is highly available and takes less staff. So we see this multiple times.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Timothy. I wish we had more time. We probably could make this event 2 hours long and probably still not get through everything. But I want to thank all the customers that filled out the survey this past year. Security continues to be the #1 concern out there, and we expect that. Multiple partitions continue to grow in this space. 71% of you are running some form of high availability. 94% of the respondents are using Power 9 or Power 8 today. We expect that to change as we survey you again for the 9th year in the fall. So get ready. We do need some more of your time again in the future. 82% are either on IBM I 7.3 or 7.4. We do know there's a new OS coming out. I can't say what, but maybe Dan can, but we won't put them under pressure today. And then, of course, the high return on investment. I also wanted to leave you with resources, that skills question. We really didn't talk about the IBM I skills at all on a top concern, but honestly, there's so much education out there, and it's only gotten better as we've gone to a more remote, virtual type environment. But I'm also excited myself. We'll see you out at Common in New Orleans. That's the plan anyways. I know Common Europe is coming up here, and then we got all kinds of great resources and even some new things like the iChimes by Charlie, which has been really well attended, the incredible iPodcast that's being put out there, the Built on Power newsletter has some new things, IT Jungle. I mean, Timothy and Alex do a great job covering all the different vendors in the space, and I know they'd love to hear more from customers too, and share your stories about the platform. And then don't forget about our local user groups. We have a ton of them out there. And I know Dan wanted to make a reminder too that IBM briefing centers are still very active. If you do need to bring your team in, IBM is willing to do those kind of one-on-one type briefings with you around the platform. So At Help Systems, we are in the space of helping people with HA, document management, cybersecurity, monitoring, business intelligence, capacity planning, and automation. And we want to let you know that we're willing to help you out. So I'll throw up that last polling question. And gentlemen, we've had a ton of questions. I want to hit a couple things. First of all, yes, the event is being recorded. It will be available for playback. Secondly, we do the survey as a service for the industry around IBM I. And so if somebody wants a copy of the report or a copy of this PowerPoint and you want to not have to reproduce your own PowerPoint slides, I'm more than willing to get that to you. Just drop me an email, tom.huntington@helpsystems.com. All right. I'm not sure if you guys have been watching the questions out there, but somebody was asking about we should have 0 for cloud systems. I think in our chart that talks about the number of servers people have, that Robert was referring to that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's somebody who doesn't have any systems on site, and they're the people that have already moved to the cloud. So I think it was Robert that was so actually he put a second comment in there that he's already moved his partitions to the cloud. So that's that's certainly something to consider for a future question there. There is a question here, Tom, about Kyndryl. But
Yes.
Kyndryl
Can you do that question? I saw that in there.
So Kyndryl is the company that IBM spun off. It used to be called GTS inside IBM, and they do, among other things, managed services and outsourcing, for example. So Kyndryl still does those, and there are actually many IBM I clients that have outsourced to IBM GTS in the past and now are being serviced by Kyndryl. We have a great relationship with Kyndryl, but really I would say the trend today is moving to the cloud. And so the trend is probably more in the direction of using Power Virtual Servers, which we talked about earlier. So yeah, Kyndryl is out there. It's spun off from IBM in the 4th quarter of this year. We have a great relationship with them, but there's also other alternatives, including the IBM Cloud Power Virtual Servers.
But not to confuse things, Ian, I think one of the things he had in there too was, well, where do we go for our support? Dan, where do they go for their support around IBM?
Okay, well, let me be really clear about that, because the support,
okay, I'll let you answer that.
The service and support did not move to Kyndryl. Okay, that was the technical services and support group. Actually, when Kyndryl spun out of IBM, services and support came into IBM Systems Group. And that's the group that Lab Services has just integrated with in the past week. So we're here, we're not going anywhere, we're part of IBM Systems. We're here to provide you break fix support, software and hardware maintenance, as well as integrating with the Lab Services team. So no changes there, except that we're more integrated into IBM Systems. And trust me, given that I'm part of that group, we're very focused on IBM I.
One last thing, Ian, I can add to that. The asset recovery services business that takes machines in trade and resells them secondhand, certified pre-owned, is also now part of IBM Systems, where it belongs. It did not go with Kyndryl.
Yes, absolutely.
So you've got the full stack, new, used, all support, financing. It's all in one place now.
It's all in one place, and we're integrating, and again, IBM I is a key component of that, and the IBM I Lab Services team is all part of this new group. So rest assured, we've got you covered there. Everything from hardware maintenance, break fix, software maintenance, through to professional services from Lab Services. Yeah.
Thank you on that. Well, guys, we've gone over the hour. I know we have a few other questions here. Dan, I might let you reach out to a couple of those questions that are out there that are more specific to you.
Okay.
Any final thoughts, Dan, from your perspective for 2022?
Nope, I was just gonna say, yeah, I think having this type of survey, which gets the kind of the pulse of the customers, and I think it very positively shows that, you know, our customers like what we're doing, and hopefully we've shown, you know, through, you know, again, education events and slides, that we're continuing to invest in the platform and hopefully listening to our customers and delivering what they need. So again, hopefully it's a good pairing between, you know, delivering what customers want and what they want to do.
Thank you, Dan. How about you, Timothy, from an IT jungle perspective? What are you excited about here in 2022?
Come on, do you read the newsletter? Power 10, let's go.
Power 10. I'm just kind of feeding that into you.
Yeah, I want to see new iron. I want to see what happens. I'm excited.
Yeah, and I guess the customers are too, with, you know, over 70% of them thinking about it, planning for it. And Ian, I think you've covered a lot from your perspective, but any final thoughts?
I'm going to throw out automation again, Dom, and
Yeah.
you've been the leader in automation for so many years, so I hope I'm not stealing your thunder there, but
No.
I just see this thing with Ansible being a real game changer, because it's a way to integrate with all the automation that's going on across the data center, not just on IBM I, but in other places as well. So my tip is look out for automation, and specifically with Ansible.
Yeah, and I'm excited about seeing all you at Common or Common Europe, and that's probably the biggest thing. Seeing your smiling faces actually versus over a webcam. I love seeing everybody over webcams, but that's not quite the same. Well, make it a wonderful day. Hard to believe it's that time of the year where we're kicking off 2022, but make it a good one and be safe. And we appreciate all of your time and all the respondents for this year's 2022 IBM I Marketplace Survey. Have a wonderful day.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.